Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to break down one of the most dramatic and costly chapters of the Russia-Ukraine war, a story many analysts are now calling Russia's worst nightmare, the loss of billions of dollars in Crimea. This is not just about explosions or destroyed equipment, but about power, control, reputation, and a strategic region that Moscow once believed was untouchable. Crimea has always held enormous importance for Russia, both symbolically and militarily. Since its annexation in 2014, the Kremlin invested heavily in turning the peninsula into a fortress. Massive funds were poured into military bases, air defense systems, naval facilities, logistics hubs, and infrastructure designed to secure long-term dominance in the Black Sea. For years, Russian officials confidently described Crimea as safe, secure, and permanently under Moscow's control. But as the war dragged on and Ukraine adapted its tactics, that sense of security began to crack. What we are witnessing now is not a single event, but a slow and painful unraveling of Russia's grip on Crimea. One strike after another has exposed weaknesses that were once hidden behind propaganda and bold statements. Each explosion, each damaged base, and each destroyed ship has carried a price tag measured not in millions, but in billions. The financial losses alone are staggering. Warships that took decades to design and build have been damaged or sunk. Advanced aircraft systems have been destroyed on the ground. Ammunition depots stocked for years have gone up in flames within seconds. Repairing or replacing this equipment is not simple, especially under sanctions that restrict access to critical technology and components. Every hit forces Moscow to spend more money it can barely afford. Beyond the raw numbers, the psychological impact is just as severe. Crimea was supposed to be Russia's safe rear, a place far from the front lines where troops could regroup and supplies could move freely. Now it has become a high-risk zone. Russian soldiers stationed there no longer feel invincible, and that shift in morale matters deeply in a prolonged conflict. Ukraine's evolving strategy has played a key role in this transformation. Instead of relying solely on traditional battlefield clashes, Kiev has focused on precision, intelligence, and targeting high-value assets. The goal has been clear: make Crimea too expensive and too dangerous for Russia to hold comfortably. By striking airfields, naval assets, and supply routes, Ukraine has forced Russia into a defensive posture it never wanted. One of the most damaging aspects of these losses is the effect on Russia's naval power in the Black Sea. The fleet based in and around Crimea was meant to project strength across the region. Instead, repeated attacks have pushed ships farther from the coast or forced them to relocate entirely. Each move reduces Russia's operational reach and increases logistical strain. Air defense systems, once proudly displayed as impenetrable shields, have also failed to deliver the level of protection promised. When systems worth hundreds of millions are bypassed or destroyed, it raises uncomfortable questions. Not only does this hurt Russia financially, but it also damages the global reputation of its military technology, which has long been a source of export revenue. Infrastructure damage adds another layer to the crisis. Bridges, fuel depots, power stations, and transport hubs are critical for sustaining military operations. When these are disrupted, everything slows down. Supplies take longer to arrive, repairs are delayed, and coordination becomes more difficult. Over time, these inefficiencies compound, draining resources and weakening overall effectiveness. The famous Crimean Bridge stands as a symbol in this story. More than just a physical structure, it represents Russia's claim over the peninsula. Any damage to it sends a powerful message that even the most heavily guarded assets are vulnerable. The economic cost of repairs, combined with the strategic disruption, turns each incident into a major setback. Internationally, the situation in Crimea has reshaped perceptions of the war. Allies watching closely see that Russian control is not as solid as once believed. This influences political decisions, military aid packages, and long-term strategic planning. When a power appears weaker, its opponents become more confident and its partners become more cautious. Inside Russia, the narrative is harder to control. While state media attempts to downplay losses, information leaks through social media and independent sources. Citizens see images of smoke rising from bases and hear reports of damaged ships. Over time, this erodes trust and raises doubts about leadership decisions and the true cost of the conflict. Economically, the pressure is relentless. Sanctions have already strained Russia's budget, limiting access to foreign capital and technology. The additional burden of repairing or replacing assets in Crimea forces difficult choices. Money spent on the military cannot be used for social programs, infrastructure at home, or economic development. This trade-off becomes more painful the longer the war continues. Crimea's tourism industry, once promoted as a jewel of the region, has also suffered. Security concerns and military activity have driven visitors away. Hotels sit empty, businesses struggle, and local economies feel the impact. While this may seem secondary compared to military losses, it adds to the overall financial drain and social dissatisfaction. Strategically, Russia now faces a dilemma. Pulling back assets reduces losses but signals weakness. Staying and reinforcing the region requires even more investment and exposes new targets. Either option carries risks, and neither offers a clear path to restoring the sense of control that once defined Crimea's role in Russian strategy. Ukraine, on the other hand, sees Crimea as central to its long-term goals. By keeping pressure on the peninsula, Kiev aims to undermine Russia's ability to sustain the war. Each successful strike serves not only a military purpose, but also a political one, reinforcing the message that occupation comes at a high cost. The use of drones, long-range missiles, and intelligence sharing has shifted the balance. These tools allow Ukraine to reach targets previously thought out of range. For Russia, defending against such threats requires constant adaptation, additional resources, and a level of coordination that becomes harder under stress. As losses mount, the question becomes how long Russia can absorb the damage. Billions already gone represent sunk costs that cannot be recovered. Future spending will only increase as equipment ages, defenses are upgraded, and personnel rotations intensify. In a war of attrition, this economic exhaustion can be as decisive as any battlefield defeat. There is also a symbolic dimension that cannot be ignored. Crimea was a cornerstone of Russia's narrative of resurgence and strength. Watching it turn into a liability rather than an asset strikes at the heart of that story. Symbols matter in politics and war, and losing control of the narrative can have far-reaching consequences. For military planners worldwide, the events in Crimea offer important lessons. Fixed bases and expensive platforms are vulnerable in modern warfare. Flexibility, dispersion, and resilience are becoming more important than sheer size or firepower. Russia's experience shows how quickly assumptions can be overturned. The human cost is another layer often overshadowed by discussions of equipment and money. Soldiers stationed in Crimea face constant uncertainty. Civilians live with disruptions and fear. Families on both sides are affected by decisions made far from the front lines. These realities deepen the tragedy of a conflict that shows no easy resolution. Looking ahead, the future of Crimea remains uncertain. Continued pressure could further weaken Russia's position, or Moscow could attempt a major reinforcement effort. Either path will demand enormous resources and carry significant risks. What is clear is that the days of Crimea being a quiet, secure stronghold are over. As the war continues, the peninsula stands as a reminder that no territory is immune to the consequences of prolonged conflict. Billions gone are not just numbers on a balance sheet. They represent lost capabilities, shattered confidence, and a strategic nightmare that Russia never planned for. In the broader context of the war, Crimea has become a focal point where military, economic, and psychological factors intersect. Control of the peninsula influences naval access, regional power balance, and international perceptions. Every development there ripples outward, shaping the course of the conflict. The story of billions lost in Crimea is ultimately a story about miscalculation. Belief in absolute security led to heavy investment without sufficient adaptability. When reality changed, the cost of that belief became painfully clear. This lesson resonates far beyond this single conflict. As we continue to follow events, it is important to look beyond headlines and understand the deeper dynamics at play. The destruction in Crimea is not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a larger pattern that reveals how modern wars are fought and won. If there is one takeaway from this unfolding situation, it is that power built on assumptions can crumble quickly. Crimea was meant to be Russia's shield in the south. Instead, it has become a drain on resources and a constant source of vulnerability. This is why many analysts now describe the situation as Russia's worst nightmare, not because of one catastrophic moment, but because of the slow, grinding realization that control comes at a price too high to comfortably pay. We will continue to monitor how this situation develops and what it means for the future of the region and the wider conflict. Thank you for staying with us, and if you found this breakdown helpful, stay tuned for more in-depth analysis as events continue to unfold.